If you work in quality control at a candy factory, you know strict safety regulations come with the job. It's why you partner with Grainger. Grainger helps you find the high-quality and compliant products your business needs to inspect, detect, and help correct issues. And the sweetest part is, everyone gets a product that's as safe to eat as it is delicious. Call 1-800-GRAINGER, click Grainger.com, or just stop by. Grainger, for the ones who get it done.
If your job at a healthcare facility includes disinfecting against viruses, you know prevention is the best medicine, and maintaining healthy spaces starts with a healthy cleaning routine. Grainger's world-class supply chain helps ensure you have the quality products you need when you need them, from disinfectants and cleaning supplies to personal protective equipment, so you can help deliver a clean bill of health. Call 1-800-GRAINGER, click Grainger.com, or just stop by. Grainger, for the ones who get it done.
On the apologeticsindex.org, the Plymouth Brethren Christian Church is described this way. In 2012, the Exclusive Brethren movement renamed itself the Plymouth Brethren Christian Church in an apparent effort to sow confusion about its true nature and origins. In reality, this extremist movement is a cult or sect of the Plymouth Brethren. Theologically, it is a cult of Christianity. Sociologically, the movement has many cult-like elements as well. After the UK Charity Commission's refusal to grant charity status to the Exclusive Brethren in the summer of 2012, an observer provided a series of explanatory comments regarding that decision. Whilst it is of course legitimate to change a name and reconstruct a website, it should not be done in such a way as to make it appear that it involves an entirely different organisation. Despite the claim that Plymouth Brethren Christian Church is the historic name, it is an entirely new invention. 2 months ago, that name did not exist. At least one member of the House of Commons has been misled. Mr. Ian Paisley Jr. praised the work of the Brethren in setting up the Every Boys Rally and Every Girls Rally, which attracts tens of thousands of young people. This relates to the Open Brethren, an entirely different organisation, and one which has never action whatsoever to the Exclusive Brethren, apart from the 1828 founder. Hello listeners, and welcome to this week's mini-series. I'm your speaker Casey, host of the Cult Vault podcast, and for this instalment I am talking with Cheryl and Richard from the Get a Life podcast. Cheryl and Richard have been working tirelessly to speak about their experiences regarding the Plymouth Brethren Christian Church. But this interview is not like many others. This talk has twists and turns and unexpected revelations that I could not foresee. It's a wild, wild ride, and the advocacy work taking place thanks to the Get a Life podcast is second to none. If you would like early access to ad-free full-length episodes, you can visit patreon.com/thecultvault to get access to that content today, as well as exclusive monthly deep dives into infamous cults. On that note, a massive welcome and a thank you to Vivian, newest patron and supporter of the Cult Vault podcast. Thank you so much for signing up and for being here to support the show. I really hope that you enjoy the exclusive content, and I hope you know how much I appreciate your support. But for now, here is Cheryl and Richard. So hello, Cheryl and Richard, and thank you so much for joining me on the show today to discuss your work, your experiences, and a group that we are yet to really dive into on this podcast. Would you both like to start by introducing yourselves to the listeners? Hi, Cheryl.
Hi, everyone. My name is Cheryl Bottenheimer. Most people know me as Cheryl Hope from any ex-member community. And I was born in a very tiny but mighty community in Canada called Maple Creek, Saskatchewan.
Thank you very much, Cheryl. It's great to have you here today. And hi, Richard.
Hi. Yeah, I'm Richard Marsh. I was born in Cambridge, UK, and have subsequently lived in Jamaica and Canada. And I'm, how old am I? 51, something like that. I have just got, and can't help bragging about it, a new baby called Kiara, who is just 3 months old and makes us all very happy.
That's wonderful. Congratulations, Richard. 3 months old is
Yeah,
oh, all sorts of things, isn't it? 3 months old.
it is.
A precious time.
It is such a precious time, such a precious time. And everybody says it goes so fast, but it's it's a strange thing, babies and time. But Jamaica, UK to Jamaica, that's a really strange change. Is there a reason for that move? Does it have anything to do with your experiences regarding the group we're talking about today?
Not exactly. My wife's Jamaican, so that's the connection.
I have heard that Jamaica, for people that visit, is a lot of it is secure compounds and things that you're not supposed to leave because you might be in danger, or is that just like a misconception?
No, that is true. It is a country that has a high level of violence in some areas. I mean, there's two Jamaicas. There's the kind of coastal holiday resorts with the hotels that are very cosmopolitan. You don't really get to meet the real, you don't get the flavor of the real Jamaica. But I was living with my fiance then in rural inland Jamaica, which is a third world country. It's very much subsistence. Yeah, I mean, a white person on their own, without local connections might not be safe in those areas. They might be perceived as, a target for burglary. But if you're integrated into the communities there, you're safe enough. So yeah, that was a real experience.
And you're both based in Canada right now together.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yep.
Have you met in person? Has some of your work taken place face to face, or is it all virtual?
I haven't met Cheryl. No, not in person.
No, we're excited for the day.
Yeah.
That's going to be such a great day because you've both done so much work together at this point, and you're both in the same country. That's going to be a great day. Do you have any plans, like conventions or conferences and things?
Not anything solid at the moment. But yeah, I'm sure we will.
Not
We will
yet.
meet up at some point. Yeah.
Yeah. We're all looking forward to meeting each other.
Yeah, that's gonna be a wonderful day. I hope that somebody catches that on film, because I think that would be like a historical moment, the two of you getting together after all this time and all this work you've done together. And Cheryl, you've always been in Canada, so your ties to the group that you were born and raised in, that's all within the country of Canada.
Yeah. Yeah.
Would it be possible, Cheryl, for you to tell us a little bit about your personal history, and how you found yourself in the podcast space as well?
Well, I honestly, like, podcasting was never on my list of things to do. I hadn't even, like, never in a million years did I think I was going to be here. But sometimes life chooses us, right? And when you find things that are needing help and you've got a passion towards it and you want to make a difference, I put myself in a very vulnerable position, and every day we just keep working at it. So I was born and raised in the Exclusive Brethren, now known as the Plymouth Brethren Christian Church. And I escaped it when I was 17 years old due to many, many different issues that were happening at the time. I honestly was very quiet in the ex-member community for like 30 years, and came across a Breaking Brethren documentary. Actually, my husband found it and watched it. And then I came across an audio that was of David Wallace talking about his incidences that he had with being told to capture Richard Marsh. And so it was really took me into this rabbit hole. And I guess I've always looked for a landing pad that was strong enough to hold what I needed to come forward with, if I needed to come forward with it. And I started doing a lot of digging. I was very particular who I was reaching out to, only because it was such a sensitive subject. And I also know how how ruthless the PBCC can be. And so it was also my safety. And I had come across somebody who lived in the same town that I had and had an incident with the same perpetrator as me just 4 years ago. And the place that she worked at was the same place that my brother had worked at, who's still in there. I'm the only one out of my family. And I knew he had daughters. And so I kind of got their ages of what they would be at. And I knew that they were very much at the age where they could have got placed in that environment. And I was like, hell no, absolutely. Cheryl, this isn't about really you anymore. This is about you putting those big girl panties on and stepping into a very vulnerable position, telling your story, alerting the community of Maple Creek. I had went and did a police report. And honestly, I did it all for my nieces. I mean, I've been in therapy for years and years and years and years. Obviously, this was a sensitive subject that once the documentary came out and Richard Marsh's story had come out, I was really in the throes of what had happened to me in my sexual abuse stuff. And I hadn't really gotten deep into it with my therapy. Most of it was the power, the coercive control, the stuff that happened with our family alone. And so I really got into that at the same time I had started this podcast. So I had a lot of pots on the stove, so to speak. But I'm a very expressive, explosive, passionate woman, as Richard can attest to. So it worked in my favor that I was in this healing of this. At the same time, it allowed me to fuel the change that needed to happen. So if anybody watches any of my podcasts, I am a mess on them. I am not necessarily this, professional piece of art that is groomed. I am just authentically the chaotic mess that I am. And it has just opened up so many doors for people inside to come forward. My emails, my phone, my Instagram, Twitter, everything is always going. Every time we put out a podcast, we try and put out 2 podcasts a week. We just hired on a UK team. We're working on getting together an Australia and New Zealand team. It is heart-wrenching, but at the same time, it is so needed. It's so needed, especially in this community of the Exclusive Brethren and the Plymouth Brethren Christian Church. It's just needed. It's gone on. I had a phone call come to me yesterday from somebody inside and just in tears and thanking me. He said, this is so overdue. This is so overdue. Yeah.
That's absolutely, absolutely incredible, Cheryl. And the name of your podcast is Get a Life.
Yeah.
And we've been posting episodes when they get released on the r/cult podcast subreddit. So anybody that has an interest in cult podcasts, you can find a whole host of shows over there, including Get a Life. And we will make sure that we include the links in the episode description to all of the places people can find that show as well. And you happened to come across information about Richard at the same time that you were coming forward with your own story. And now Richard is here with us having this conversation, and you're both doing all of this work together. So Richard, can you please give us a brief history on the PBCC, how it started, who started it, how it changed, and where your own personal history ties into that timeline?
Sure. It started in the 1830s, where there was almost a global burst of religious activity, particularly in English-speaking countries. So it's very much contemporary with Jehovah's Witnesses, started at the same time from the same kind of movement, and Seventh-day Adventists, and they were all kind of variations on a theme. Basically, people sort of took up the Bible and started reading their own ideas into it, or different ideas from the mainstream churches, and building a following. So the guy who's mostly associated with the founding of the Brethren is a guy called John Nelson Darby. He didn't actually start it, but he became the most influential leader. The one thing he really contributed to the world, if that's the contributed is the word, is the idea of the rapture, which is this whole kind of end times apocalyptic idea that all the believers are going to magically levitate up into heaven, and then the world's going to be destroyed with lots of fireworks. He was the guy who kind of promoted that idea heavily, and there are now millions and millions of people around the globe who believe in the rapture, but there's only 55,000 exclusive brethren. So that one idea got a lot more legs than the rest of his philosophy. So the irony is, it started out actually as an anti-cult movement. It started out with Darby and some of his friends saying it's not right that Christianity is split up into all these little sects. There's Presbyterians and Methodists and Catholics. So they kind of set up a table where any Christian could come and join them in worship in a simple communion ceremony with bread and wine. And there was no, it was don't ask, don't tell in terms of what else you happen to believe. As long as you were a Christian, you could join them. It was this wonderful, it was a utopia idea, and it was genuinely a good idea. But within Darby's lifetime.
Hello, it is Ryan, and I was on a flight the other day playing one of my favorite social spin slot games on ChumbaCasino.com. I looked over at the person sitting next to me, and you know what they were doing? They were also playing Chumba Casino. Coincidence? I think not. Everybody's loving having fun with it. Chumba Casino is home to hundreds of casino-style games that you can play for free anytime, anywhere, even at 30,000 feet. So sign up now at ChumbaCasino.com to claim your free welcome bonus. That's ChumbaCasino.com and live the Chumba life.
No purchase necessary. VGW. Void where prohibited by law. See terms and conditions. 18+.
It had gone to the opposite extreme. They became more and more fussy about membership requirements. This one and that one was turned away, and then it got down to very obscure and fine points of doctrine, and eventually it became the most sort of cultic cult of all, the most exclusive of any sect in Christianity. And you had to sign up to, there was a whole list of doctrines and rules. It just became extremely conservative. It was all relatively harmless and relatively conventional right through till right through the 1960s. It had always tended to focus around one leader. They don't have any formal hierarchy. They just have one leading figure, which is always dangerous. And how it's like a dictatorship. I mean, dictatorships can be good if you have a good dictator. If he's a really good guy, he can use his dictatorial powers for good. But of course, it doesn't happen because power corrupts. In 1960, a guy called James Taylor Jr. took over this very boring, very conventional, very introverted Christian sect, which was, mostly just plain Protestantism, and he completely radicalized it. Not, I think, exactly intentionally. That the problem was he was an alcoholic and a womanizer, and as the 60s proceeded, his behavior became more and more eccentric, and he became more and more publicly lewd and disgusting and drunk. But because the brethren were so fixated on the idea that their leader was infallible, then of course the brethren adjusted their religious morals to accommodate this guy. So they said, it's okay to grope women and it's okay to get drunk. And of course it provoked a split. I mean, a lot of the decent, sensible people who weren't quite so brainwashed left. I think 6,000 to 10,000 brethren left the movement, or the exclusive wing of the movement, in that period. And what it left was this kind of rump of people who were, by definition, the most gullible 75%.
Or the most, up for the lifestyle of drinking and harassing women.
Well, yeah, it wasn't exactly. It was more the people. You see, they all went in for the drinking, but the womanizing was only for the leader. No one else was allowed to do that.
Of course,
so they didn't really get a lot of fun out of it, other than, the kind of but I expect they enjoyed watching the old boy in action. But they didn't get to partake of these benefits to any degree. So I think it was really the most gullible ones who were left, the ones who, were stuck on this idea that this was the only place. I mean, the problem with the brethren, or the problem with trying to leave the brethren, is that you're brainwashed from birth to believe that if these are the only people going to heaven, these are God's chosen people, and if you leave, you're going to go to hell. And of course, that's a great deterrent to leaving. I mean, why would you risk it? Even if you had some doubts, you're not going to take that chance. I mean, it's like an insurance policy. Stay in here and you will get to heaven. The other huge deterrent to leaving is their social isolation policy, which is that if someone leaves, then they are shunned and cut off. You can't talk to them, you can't eat with them. And so, of course, leaving doesn't just mean changing your belief or abandoning your religion. It also means losing your wife, your children, your parents, and every single person you ever knew. So, a lot of people, I suspect at the time of that 1960s crisis, a lot of people who actually stayed in their minds, they knew it was wrong, but they weren't prepared for the sacrifice of, losing everything, losing their family and their friends. So that kind of came to a head in 1970 when James Taylor Jr. went up to Aberdeen in Scotland and was caught in bed with someone else's wife. And, that kind of provoked a final exodus of a lot of people. And then the guy died. He died later in 1970. And since then, they've had a succession of further leaders. There was James Symington from 1970 to 86. He was a pig farmer out of North Dakota. Then there was John Hales, who was an Australian businessman, and then it's been his son, Bruce Hales, also an Australian businessman. And they're all regarded as sort of manifestations of the Holy Spirit. They're regarded as divine. The brethren believe that Jesus actually personally, in a real body, not just spiritually, comes down and talks to them and tells them what to say. And they just play this card for all it's worth. So where I came into it, I was born in 71, so just after this big Aberdeen split. My parents were very caring, but they were also very deeply indoctrinated. So you kind of grew up in this very religious atmosphere. You weren't allowed to bring, we went to normal schools. This was before brethren had their own school, so at least we got to a regular school. But you had to sit out of anything to do with Christmas. You had to sit out of religious assemblies. You had to sit out of sex education. You weren't allowed to bring your friends home from school. So you were always the odd one out. And that got a whole lot more difficult when you got to high school, secondary school, because kids are teenagers and they can be cruel, and there was all the bullying and everything that goes along, because we didn't have radio or television, so most of the time we didn't know what the other kids were talking about. That's what they talk about, what was on TV last night. You just didn't know. So it was a tough. Although my parents are very kind and they were quite well off, didn't lack for anything, it was still a rough upbringing. Nothing compared to what Cheryl experienced with sexual abuse, but it's tough growing up in a cult when you're different from all your peers. So I was a good believing Plymouth brother, sucked it all up, didn't question it. Finally came to a crunch in 2015. There were all sorts of adventures in between, but the real crunch point was when I discovered that the brethren business that I was working for was perpetrating a really nasty and dangerous fraud on the National Health Service. And I was gobsmacked, because up to that point, as far as I was aware, to my belief, brethren, for all their faults, were normally very honest, and
Mhm.
there was a big emphasis on being righteous in business and paying your taxes and not misdescribing things in the advertising sense. And they were regarded as, for all their unpleasant excommunication activities, they were regarded as good citizens. And to find that this business was doing this very blatant, very ugly fraud. And not only that, it was a business. I mean, I was in the UK at the time, but the Australian half of the business was actually run by members of the Hales family, the sons of Bruce Hales, who's the universal leader. It's like kind of finding that the Pope is running a brothel on the side. Um, it's that kind of cognitive dissonance. And it gave me this real dilemma, because I knew if I spoke out, I'd be excommunicated, because brethren like to keep everything. You do not ever report other brethren to the police or to the authorities, regardless of how serious the crime is. It's all dealt with internally. I knew perfectly well if I just reported this to the brethren and not to the authorities, that it would just provoke a huge cover-up. So, but by that time, I was really disillusioned with the whole thing, and this was the last straw. So I did a multi-page report on the whole thing. I gathered all the documentation evidence I could, sent it to the National Health Service and the Health and Safety Executive and everyone I could think of, and also to the kind of leading brethren in my locality. And sure enough, they were on the doorstep before I'd even got home, frothing at the mouth, absolutely wild with me. And yeah, I mean, it's a long story, but yeah, eventually I was gone. They just made life too incredibly unpleasant. And what happened subsequently to that is,
It is Ryan Seacrest here. There was a recent social media trend which consisted of flying on a plane with no music, no movies, no entertainment. But a better trend would be going to chumbacasino.com. It's like having a mini social casino in your pocket. Chumba Casino has over 100 online casino-style games, all absolutely free. It's the most fun you can have online and on a plane. So grab your free welcome bonus now at chumbacasino.com. Sponsored by Chumba Casino.
No purchase necessary. VGW Group. Void where prohibited by law. 21 plus. Terms and conditions apply.
I set up a website, exposing all this fraud. I also found other brethren businesses engaged in some very massive fraudulent activity. And I also started calling out the whole Hales family, what we now know as a crime syndicate, and also calling out brethren's misbehavior, their cruel excommunication. So I kind of let them have it with both barrels. I didn't have anything to lose at that point. I hadn't any money. What were they going to do? And it resulted in them pursuing me around the globe with lawyers and private investigators and private investigators who weren't actually private investigators. A whole amazing saga where they were desperately trying to find me. I've been arrested. They managed to get me arrested, I think 3 times in total. They've had at least 3 different private investigators trying to find me. It's a saga. So they were hunting me in England, and I went to Jamaica. I don't know if they ever managed to find me in Jamaica, but as soon as I was back in England, they were on my case again. Then I came to Canada. And then I found my wife was being stalked in Canada. They were following her home from work. And then we managed to trick. We found out what who the private investigator was that was looking for me, and we actually managed to trick the guy. He had contacted a friend of mine to see if my friend would rat me out and tell me where he is. So my friend and I kind of put our heads together, and my friend tells the investigator that no, he wasn't prepared to help, but he had a friend who was really good at computer hacking, and maybe his friend could hack into Richard's emails to find out his location. Anyway, we then set up this sort of anonymous email account, contact the private investigator pretending to be a computer hacker, and offered to get emails from my account. I mean, he didn't realize he was actually talking to the guy he was looking for. So yeah, we sent him. I would write emails actually on my genuine email account, making out I was in Scotland while I was actually in Canada, and we would sell these to the guy. We actually took, I don't know, $6,000 off this guy, me
my
just selling
gosh.
him my own emails. So some of it's been fun. It hasn't all been bad. Anyway, eventually the brethren realized that their PI was being conned, and it all went quiet. And we kind of waited to see what would happen next. The next thing that happened is we get a call from this guy, David Wallace. David Wallace isn't even a private investigator. He's a kind of a political operative. He's the sort of guy who does very nasty deals to try and, dig dirt on politicians or set people up to bring them down in the sort of very murky political world. This guy had been hired by the brethren to find me. I mean, he's much more expensive than a private investigator. This guy is top notch. He's like a real top notch underworld operative, with all sorts of connection to Russia and organized crime and you name it. And this guy had been paid enormous sums of money to find me. And David Wallace, in spite of his murky field of operations, he's not a violent guy. As he says, he doesn't do wet jobs. And he realized that, he had been hired on the premise that they wanted to find Richard to serve legal papers on him. But then when he pressed them on this point, they couldn't produce the legal papers. And they said, well, no, actually, we just want you to hold the guy and we're going to take his hard drive. And they've got a team to call in. They said, look, when you found him, just call us and we'll bring in a team. Now, what that team was going to do to me, whether it was murder or kidnap or whether they just wanted to beat me up, I don't know. But anyway, I recorded this call from David Wallace. It's one thing you learn when you're on the run is always have a recorder on your phone. And we published it on the ex-brethren community. We published it on YouTube. And David Wallace was absolutely horrified. He calls me up and says, look, I'm trying to help you out. And now I've got people hunting me because they realize I've turned the table on them. But
what is happening?
To the guy's credit, he kind of came round to my side, and he said, well, look, I'm tired of doing all this dirty work. I'm going to throw my lot in with you. I've got a whole load of incredibly interesting stories about all these politicians I've worked for. I think it's time for me to retire and write the book. But he's not a very organized. He's not a computer literate sort of guy. Everything's done on phone. And he had this enormous archive of 3 or 4 years of all his emails, all his texts, all his Twitter messages, his Facebook messages, enormous archive of stuff. About 20% of it related to the brethren. The rest of it related to quite prominent politicians in Alberta and Ontario. And he said, well, if you want this, sort through it. He sent me the whole lot. It was a huge file. It nearly crashed my computer. I just happened to be off work for a few weeks. And so I went through it all. I turned it all into PDFs, put it all in order. And it was about 6,500 pages. And my plan was that in Canada, the brethren are not at all well known because they're a fairly small proportion of the population. But I thought if I can sort of launch this whole scandalous pack of papers. You've heard of the sort of the Paradise Papers and these kind of leaks you get from tropical countries, the Panama Papers. So that if I could launch it like that, it'll be kind of like a Trojan horse. Everyone will read it because it's got all this scandal about well-known politicians, and they'll get to learn about these nasty Plymouth Brethren Christian church as well. So put it all together, sent it to a bunch of journalists, and it's generated a whole series of newspaper articles and podcasts, and it's still going. I still haven't publicly released the whole lot. So yeah, that was, that leaves out an enormous amount of stuff, but basically that's where I am now. I'm now writing my own autobiography. which there's suddenly a demand for.
Yeah,
And
I can imagine.
Yeah. And so one of the journalists I sent this to produced actually it was before I'd actually put together all David Wallace's papers, but when I'd launched the recording of his phone call to me, that attracted the attention of a documentary producer who produced the Breaking Brethren documentary, which gave the whole thing a lot higher profile in Canada. Then we were contacted by a guy called James DeFiore, who's a podcaster who was kind of scouting around for new, it only started fairly recently. It was scouting around for new subjects to get into. And he latched onto this. And then Cheryl saw his podcast and she saw Breaking Brethren. So she contacted me and she contacted James. And, we kind of realized that podcasting was the medium for this stuff. And it's just been incredibly, I mean, for a very, very niche subject. I mean, exclusive brethren is a very, very small subject, but yeah, we get, average around 1,000 views for each podcast. And the great thing is for us, the thing that we're really excited about is a lot of those views are from people inside the church. And that's the audience that I'm really, really excited about reaching out to, because the only way you can escape, I mean, the wall, the bars of the cage are not physical, they're in the heads of the members. And the only way you can break them is to get inside their heads yourself and, break those delusions that they're trapped in. So this is how we do it.
Step into the world of power, loyalty, and luck.
I'm gonna make him an offer he can't refuse.
With family, cannolis, and spins mean everything.
Now, you wanna get mixed up in the family business.
Introducing The Godfather at ChumbaCasino.com. Test your luck in the shadowy world of The Godfather slot.
Someday, I will call upon you to do a service for me.
Play The Godfather now at ChumbaCasino.com.
Welcome to the family.
No purchase necessary. VGW Group. Void where prohibited by law. 21 plus. Terms and conditions apply.
You say everything so casually, and I am in absolute shock. And Cheryl is still like laughing and reacting to things that you're saying. So even though she must have heard this story so many times, it's wild. It sounds like an episode of 24.
But you cannot make this shit up. You just can't.
It's wild, and we're laughing, but it must have been at times quite scary to experience gang stalking in that way and fair gaming in the way that you've been exposed to it. And they want your hard drive. They don't want the hard drive to find dirt on you. They want your hard drive because you've got things on them, surely.
Oh, 100%. Yeah. I mean, I'm still sitting on all David. I mean, some of the emails from David Wallace, like the Brethren emails I've published, but the vast majority of it I'm still enjoying sitting on, partly because I want to kind of release them along with my book, and partly because, there's sort of documentary and so on enterprises. But it's a very nice position to be in when you're just sort of one guy on your own up against a multi-billion-dollar corporation, to be sitting on a pile of dirt. It's a really comfortable pile of dirt because, there's nothing they can do about it. They're scared of me.
They've tried a lot of things, and it's actually worked out in your favor. The person they sent after you to locate your hard drive was the person whose hard drive they probably should have been thinking about trying to do something with, and now you have all of that stuff. That is just such a wild story. And so many of the things that you've said remind me of Scientology. They remind me of things that people that have left Scientology have experienced. And when you said that the PBCC is a niche area. It certainly is, but cults is not. And so much of what you've said about the shunning processes and the gang stalking, and people showing up on your doorstep, it's so akin to Jehovah's Witnesses and so many other destructive religious groups that exist. So it might be focusing on one religious group that has, around 55,000 people around the world who all seem to have been after you at one point. It's still helping us to connect the dots between other destructive practices. So it's amazing. And the fact that there are individuals in this group that are listening and accessing the show that you're both doing together is another wonderful thing. And I can definitely see this being made into some kind of documentary. The stuff about the Plymouth Brethren itself is wild on its own, and then your story, Richard, is just like something out of an actual Hollywood action film. That's some wild stuff.
Yeah, I'm not the only one. I mean, there are other leavers who have been through very, very similar experience with the private investigators and being arrested on all kinds of false charges. Some of them are not quite ready to speak out yet. I mean, that's really the tipping point. I mean, when you get this kind of aggression, you go two ways. It's fight or flight. You either go big or you go home. So, I went big.
Cheryl, something that you mentioned in your introduction was that you recognized that the experiences that you had growing up were most likely experiences that your young nieces would be going through after you had managed to distance yourself from the group. Did you have sort of a moment of realizing that it was the entire PBCC itself that was corrupt and not just the small group that you were associated with? Or was it only when you moved away that you realized the whole thing seems to be problematic?
I knew Maple Creek was horrible, absolutely horrible. I didn't realize, when you're sexually abused from a very, very young age, I try and explain this to people because they get so overwhelmed with well, my story's not like yours. And I'm like, yeah, but you have to understand that I was very young. And so it's all I knew, right? Whereas somebody who's like 8 or 9 and all of a sudden it happens to it, right? But I honestly, you don't think that it might have happened to somebody else, right? And so when all these stories started landing on my lap, especially the specific one, I can't even tell you, it shattered my world inside me to think that if I didn't come forward, my one thing that I didn't want was my niece showing up on my doorstep with my perpetrator's body on her. And I hadn't did anything to do with it. I didn't say anything, right? So I knew that this was an opportunity. I really realized, holy crap, this is much bigger than what you thought it was, Cheryl. And it's time. It was just time. It was time to literally not be afraid anymore and just step up and do it for somebody that I'll probably never get to meet, right? But it was just, there was no way. There was no way I was going to have that somebody show up on my doorstep with my perpetrators, the same story on them, and I could have done something about it. And, I actually have had a report come to, I know what I did worked, right? So there was an incident that has happened that, I can't go into it here, but it literally, why I came forward worked. And I don't know how long it worked for, but I know of 8 incidents where it got diverted.
Were you surprised to learn that this type of abuse was perpetuated throughout the Plymouth Brethren internationally?
Oh, so shocked. Yeah, absolutely. It's just, and I honestly have to say, I haven't recovered from that. I am in the throes of therapy while I'm doing this, because I'm the type of person where I wear my heart on my sleeve. And when you listen to someone's story, it's like you're living it, right? It's when you just have that kind of care and compassion for other human beings, right? It's hard to have separation. And it's just, it's heart-wrenching, absolutely freaking heart-wrenching to know that there are people still enduring horrible sexual abuse in there. And our policing system, all the systems that we have do not protect this kind of stuff. Like I had my lead investigator when I had an incident of somebody come forward who was in there, and he said, well, just can you tell that person, like we can get a hold of social services. And I said that's not how, like you are not understanding what I came out of, because there is no way I could call up social services and say, hey, go to this house. I said that 15-year-old would literally look at that social services and be like, oh no, it never happened to me. And then she go get that door closes and her life is torn apart. Like it's such a, I just really believe we do not have the systems in place to attend to any of this kind of abuse in any of these cults. We just don't. And I'm finding through doing these podcasts that the biggest landing pad or platform is to have people coming forward telling their stories, because it sets off this domino. Then this next person listens to enough of them and says, I'm ready to come forward and tell my story. And then it goes and it goes and it goes and it goes to the point where there's so many people standing up telling their story that eventually something has to change somewhere. And that's what I hope for. That's what I bank on. I believe that truth will always persevere. It will always persevere. And I believe that's why Richard is still standing. I believe that's why David Wallace decided to do what he did. Because when you stand up and you get rid of that fear and you stand up in your own truth and speak from that place, it cannot be washed away. It just can't be. It's solid.
Gosh, you two are like inspirational. It's amazing to hear you speak that way, Cheryl. And I agree with you that there has to be change, especially some type of regulation or oversight around religions that are given the privileges of protection, basically protection of freedom of religion and tax exemption and all of the nice things that religious groups get to have, with also no real meddling from outside institutions.
It's like they all need to be grounded, right? All the religions need to be grounded, and somebody needs to be placed inside each one at every moment to be able to govern it, because we can bring in all these laws as much as we want, right? We can bring them all in. The thing is, from what I know, from what I lived, and everything that's happened in the PBCC in the last 10 years, I mean, Richard can attest this, where there was letters written out and they changed their meaning for that letter for when someone came to it, and then went back to what they were doing before. So it's laws are not like, there's got to be some way that governs the laws that are put in. Shunning needs to go. It's got to be the first thing that has to go. That rule has to be taken out, but then there's got to be something that governs that so that it's not brainwashed in another way. Because to do with the PBCC, they can, I mean, you listen to any or read the articles and they have all of these responses, right? And it's all lies. It's absolute all lies. They could say, oh, it's the family's choice to have contact, but it is drilled in you that you don't do that.
Yeah. And I imagine you're treated very differently at congregations and gatherings if you stick to the law, but not the religious teachings or expectations.
Yeah. So I don't know. I think the way that we are able to tackle this on all the fronts of all these different cults, right, is helping people have the courage to stand up, trying to help them release that fear of what's been indoctrinated into them, right? Because when you gain your own power and you can stand up and move forward, all of a sudden the army out here of truth starts getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And then there's no choice but to have change happen. And accountability comes from the people, not from the law.
That is the end of part 1 of this mini-series on the Plymouth Brethren Christian Church. For more information on the Get a Life podcast, you can follow the links in the episode description, or to get in touch with me, you can find me at cultvaultpodcast@gmail.com or follow me on Twitter and Instagram at cultvaultpod. I'm your speaker, Casey, host of the Cult Vault podcast.
Hello, it is Ryan, and I was on a flight the other day playing one of my favorite social spin slot games on chumbacasino.com. I looked over at the person sitting next to me, and you know what they were doing? They were also playing Chumba Casino. Coincidence? I think not. Everybody's loving having fun with it. Chumba Casino is home to hundreds of casino-style games that you can play for free anytime, anywhere, even at 30,000 feet. So sign up now at chumbacasino.com to claim your free welcome bonus. That's chumbacasino.com and live the Chumba life.
No purchase necessary. VGW Group. Void where prohibited by law. See terms and conditions. 18+.